Oh, you have to hold it. Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestry and traditional lands of the Mi'kma'ki people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we're all treaty people. So I would like to ask each member to say their name and which community they represent. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. My name is Mafumo Chidzonga. I represent the African diaspora community.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jerry Taylor, and that's all I know. I don't represent. What did you say? That's me right there. Okay.
Good evening, folks. I'm Daryl Johnson, and I represent the African Nova Scotian community.
Hi, my name is Chioma. I represent the African Nova Scotian community.
My name is Andrew Howe. I represent East Preston.
Do I have to hold? I'm Taylor Carvery. I'm a descendant of Africville.
Lillian Missy Searle, and I represent Hammonds Plains, Halifax, North Preston, East Preston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. My name is Tamar Pryor Brown. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the African Nova Scotian Affairs Integration Officer Advisor. And I'm here tonight with my colleagues, Tracy, Russell, and Jocelyn. This is a brief overview that was provided earlier in the year to when the committee originally oriented, but some folks weren't in attendance, so we're going to kind of give a brief overview again. Oh, I have the clicker, don't I? Sure. Okay, I'm afraid of these wires. Okay, first of all, why was our office created? This is just a little brief history on why our office was created. We were created from the HRM apology to the former residents and descendants of Africville in February 2010. HRM reached a settlement agreement with Africville, and therefore the ANCO office was created September 2012. ANCO had a permanent advisor hired in April 2015, and today the office, Today, the office houses an advisor, an ABR coordinator, as well as an outreach and research coordinator. We can click that, Dorothy, or Ian now? No worries. ANCO provides leadership, strategic direction, policy advice, and expertise on matters concerning the African Nova Scotian community to all parts of the organization. Our staff works with business units to improve relationships, engage and encourage the participation of African Nova Scotian communities in municipal affairs. Please click. Okay. ANCO has developed an offer reaching out from an Afrocentric place training to HRM employees so they can better understand the history of African Nova Scotians as part of the founding communities of Nova Scotia. And so they can better understand what Afrocentricity is and how it can help us serve African Nova Scotian communities. It also enables them to learn best practices so that we can successfully engage African Nova Scotian communities and understand the importance of culturally appropriate engagement methods. It also helps them to understand and build and apply an Afrocentric community engagement model, which works for assorted business units that engage community. The Land Titles Initiative. It's funny you mentioned that. Let me see here. I think we've
Chair, just as a information for you, it does look like we're having some issues with the streaming of the meeting. You
Okay.
can continue. We are documenting it in the minutes.
Okay.
But I wanted to let you know that it does look, we are having some streaming issues and we are trying to figure that out right now.
Okay, perfect.
I think we're back on the, there we go. That's okay. Thank you. I'm sorry about that, panel. We also engage communities and evaluate internal policy to address anti-Black racism, and we lead community circles, employment circles, and those are to share HRM information on specific services and opportunities that we may have for African Nova Scotian communities as well. Thank you, Ian. We also have a few collaborations that I would like to touch on. So one of the collaborations, we work closely with the Halifax Partnership to move the African Nova Scotian Road to Economic Prosperity work forward. ANCO, under the former senior advisor, was instrumental in the inception of this project, collaborating with Caroline Wright, Director of Strategic Initiatives and Capacity Building and Executive Director of the Road to Economic Prosperity. And ANCO is still an integral part of this work today, working with our African Nova Scotian communities within the municipality. And for those that may not be aware, the Road to Economic Prosperity Action Plan, it's a collaborative plan developed and owned by the African Nova Scotian community to advance economic development and community priorities. So a number of consultations were held with the African Nova Scotian community within the municipality to identify key issues and solutions to address historic and present-day economic challenges, as well as opportunities. The Road to Economic Prosperity Action Plan identifies strategic priorities, objectives, and actions to drive growth and prosperity in African Nova Scotian communities. And they do this under three pillars, three strategic priorities. So the first one is to build unity and capacity among African Nova Scotians. The second pillar is to establish land ownership, develop infrastructure, and attract investment. And the third pillar is to increase participation in education, employment, and entrepreneurship. So as part of the effort to better engage African Nova Scotian communities, HRM and the Office of ANSIO and the Halifax Partnership have been instrumental in ensuring that as a municipality, we're doing a better job engaging and delivering services to African Nova Scotian communities in HRM. So as Halifax's economic development organization, the Halifax Partnership continues to prioritize and focus improving African Nova Scotians' attachment to the labor force while supporting business development and capacity building in African Nova Scotian communities. I also want to touch on the Land Titles Initiative. We are also a collaborator with the Land Titles Initiative, and together with ANSIO and HRM Finance, we are able to work under the legislative process administered by the Government of Nova Scotia's Department of Lands and Forestry that was to clear land title issues for residents who live in 13 Nova Scotian communities, and 3 of those communities are here in HRM. The Halifax Regional Municipality has the legislative authority to provide tax relief to certain properties in the land titles clarification area. This authority is outlined in Section 5A of Administrative Order 10. And that speaks to partial tax exemptions for some. So if there's a landowner that received a recent certificate of title, they can apply for this exemption under that order. And I think it's once a year, they go to council and they get considered for a tax exemption. Because once you finally wait and you get your certificate of title, it seems a bit unfair to have a backlog of taxes come with that. So we have some tax forgiveness applications. Are we back on? You're killing me up here. Okay. HRM is also involved. HRM staff have taken hiring manager training, and we sit on some panels as requested by business units to bring a particular lens to the table. So that's something that they didn't have years ago. It's great to have ANSIO staff sit at the table and provide an African descent lens when there's somebody sitting across from you trying to be hired. So ANSIO also offers some lunch and learns and to business units upon request. For example, last year we showed a film on Africville and brought former residents to speak to those who attended the session. And this year we had a session on the Land Titles Initiative where we brought in their navigators to present to 2 different business units on the work that they do, as well as community members look to us to make those connections within the municipality depending on their needs. We'll sort of bridge that gap between community and government and get them connected with who they need to be connected with. So we also lead the organization in recognition of African Heritage Month. We sit also on the Provincial African Heritage Month Committee, as well as we provide input in collaboration with community on those 2 committees as well. Yearly, we have a collaboration with the Nova Scotian Human Rights Commission for an annual International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination event. The day recognizes that the injustices and prejudice fueled by racial discrimination take place every day, is observed annually on March 21st, and it commemorates the day that the police in Sharpeville, South Africa, opened fire and killed 69 people at a peaceful demonstration against apartheid passed laws in 1960. While much progress has been made, Indigenous peoples and racialized and religious minority communities in Canada continue to face racism and discrimination every day. And this day serves to call to action for individuals, organizations, and all levels of government to actively work to eliminate all forms of racial discrimination, injustice, and systemic racism and hate. So the last couple of years, we held this partnership event. It was open to the public. We held that event at the Paul O'Regan Library. And we intend to do it again this March. We'll keep you posted on that. And I believe I'm handing this over to my colleague, Russell Brooks.
Good evening, folks. As Tamar mentioned, my name is Russell Brooks. I'm the Anti-Black Racism Program Coordinator. I'm going to provide a bit of an update on some of the anti-Black racism initiatives and just kind of give an overview of kind of what's happening, kind of where we're moving with those anti-Black racism initiatives. So as you can see, it talks about how we've evaluated how anti-Black racism plays a role in the municipality and the methods that we need to use to eradicate it through the anti-Black racism strategy and action plan. So what we have done is we've done a lot of engagement within the organization where we've engaged employees and really tried to speak to employees to get an understanding of where they are with their understanding of anti-Black racism and the impact that it has on the organization and the impact that it has on the programs and services that we offer under municipal government. We've also engaged with some community stakeholders that are well connected across the Black communities and provide different programs and services to really make sure that they're providing the feedback and ensuring that we're doing the engagement in an intentional and meaningful way to make sure that we're reaching folks that we need to reach and we're hearing from the folks that we need to hear from. And then beyond that, we also did engagement all across the municipality, targeting all of the historic Black communities within the municipality. And we, with an emphasis to hear from folks of African ancestry to really help identify some of the barriers and the gaps, and also to identify the solutions on how we can, combat those and address those and action those items. So we've compiled a lot of that feedback, and we're using that to drive the development of the strategy and action plan and really implementing the action items that are going in to those deliverables. The next item there is the Anti-Black Racism Steering Committee. And what that is it's an internal committee that consists of representation across various and multiple business units across the municipality, with a lot of those folks that sit on that committee being folks in a leadership role. And what that committee does, it really makes sure that we're moving the work, in an urgent manner. We're making sure that we're delivering on our timelines and we're reaching the goals that we've set out for as a municipality and addressing anti-Black racism. So that steering committee is instrumental in kind of how we're approaching and delivering on the work. And as you can see there, it talks about the draft of the anti-Black racism strategy and action plan. So it's nearly complete. So it consists of several recommendations in a variety of areas that are going to help us deliver and reach the goals that we're trying to reach when we're trying to address the issues and the barriers that have been identified. Next slide. So in terms of what's underway, so one of the main things that we've heard from a lot of the employees was really folks saying that they really had a lack of understanding, whether that's to the history of anti-Black racism in this city, in this province, and in this country, and it's really like a lot of folks weren't really comfortable and confident with their ability to have those conversations around anti-Black racism and the impacts that it has on the workplace, and then how that spills into the programs and services that we offer. So we've undertaken a huge commitment to learning and training around anti-Black racism and the history, and making sure that people understand how those issues, impact what we're doing now, and why it's important that we address it, and why indeed it is an urgent matter that we need to make sure that we are addressing it. So we've developed anti-Black racism training that we are going to be offering to employees all across the organization. We had Anti-Black Racism Speaker Series. It's an ongoing speaker series where we've invited external experts and subject experts on different issues related to anti-Black racism to really make sure that we're unpacking, the meaning of, anti-Black racism, the impacts of anti-Black racism, and just to share some of the examples of what we've done is we've had Dr. Amasori Dryden, who's on the board for the national board for medical school and like the curriculum for that program. And, she shared a lot of the inequities in healthcare. We had a session on white privilege and systemic racism and allyship. We've had a session on just unpacking the meaning of anti-Black racism. We want to kind of start from the beginning and make sure that people truly understand what we're talking about when we're talking about anti-Black racism. A lot of times people throw around a lot of terminology, but we want to make sure that they understand it. We wanted to make sure that we did it in a way that it was easy for folks to digest. And again, we've had 7 sessions so far. The next session, we're going to have a panel conversation with youth who identifies African ancestry, who will talk about the impact of municipal services or the lack of some municipal services on Black youth and the Black community. So we're hoping that that'll help identify some of the, the areas that we need to address with youth services. So the next one speaks to kind of why all of you are here. The creation of the African Descent Advisory Committee. This was really about, making sure that this collective voice is brought to the table to identify and address issues that maybe we have missed. And hopefully you folks will help us to improve some of the services and programs that we're already offering to make sure that we are, listening to all of the collective voices of African ancestry across the municipality. The next one speaks to the development of the Anti-Black Racism Grants Program. We're looking forward to launching that in the new year. We're just finalizing the final details to really bring that and be able to offer that program to community. And really the meaning behind that program is to really to build community capacity. A lot of times, organizations are trying to do, meaningful work, but, they need to make sure that community is involved and communities leading the work. So that program will really target grassroots organizations and in hopes of having community lead the work. Community can identify what some of the problems are and also come up with those solutions and have the funds to, carry that through with their projects. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jaslyn Skeet, and I'm the Outreach and Research Coordinator for ANSIO. So as an Outreach and Research Coordinator for ANSIO, one of the ways I engage with community is through employment circles. And this involves actively reaching out to the African Nova Scotian communities and sharing HRM employment opportunities. We want to ensure that our African Nova Scotian communities are aware of available job openings to build or start their careers. In order to not over-engage community, we try to bring many career opportunities at once. So at the end of the month, we're going to have employment circles at Lucasville and Upper Hammonds Plains. People such as Active Transportation, the Cogswell Exchange, Transit. So we try to bring as many business units together to be a part of these employment circles so that everybody has a chance to hear of the new opportunities. Also part of my role is I do community circles, which unlike employment circles, they're focused on keeping the African Nova Scotian communities informed about HRM updates. So it emphasizes the importance of ensuring that African Nova Scotian communities' voices are heard in the decision-making process for new initiatives and strategies. Next is I am currently researching and collaborating with partners and members of the community to make sure that there's updated information on our HRM and ANSIO website. We want to make sure that the community is highlighted accurately. I also do my best to attend community events, as showing up to community should not be a one-time effort, but a continuous commitment. So I like to be a part of the community by being present and actively engaging as much as I can. Also, a part of my role is co-facilitating HRM training sessions called Reaching Out from an Afrocentric Place. This is an internal training for employees that gives them an overview of what Afrocentricity is and how to better work with our African Nova Scotia communities. Being in a research position, I'm always curious and exploring the latest developments and practices in diversity and inclusion with other municipalities, with a particular focus on the well-being of our African descent people. Our aim is to gain insights into different successful initiatives and to improve and adapt where needed. And that's all for me. And this is how you can find us.
So 9.1.2, I believe we were going to do votes on the proposed meeting schedule for 2024. Is that correct? Yes.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity people may have questions on the presentation? I don't know if there
Yeah.
are. Okay,
True.
all right.
True.
Sorry.
You're right. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, okay. Yeah, of course.
This has to do with the anti-Black racism training for staff. And the question I have is, what training is available to Black employees in coping with this damage in the workplace? Okay, I don't remember who talked about, I think you did. Is
Through you, Madam Chair, to the member. So currently, there isn't training that's specifically just for the Black employees. However, one of the things that I didn't mention is that we've had so far, we've had two anti-Black racism conferences. We had a leadership conference, and then we've had a conference that was for employees in other areas of the organization. So what we want to do in the future is we want to have a conference that's centered around Black employees, and that really speaks to, you know, how they can cope and how we can best support, you know, that experience of coming to a workplace and dealing with some of the things that they deal with. So in the future, like we may look to develop training to better support those folks, but we are looking to have a conference that focuses around those pieces.
Oh, thank you. The connection between anti-Black racism and white supremacy, or white privilege, I should say. See, once you go ahead and say, okay, the people who need help here are the people that are doing wrong. What about the victims? And also the idea of legislating or showing people how to treat others. They'll cover up and pretend that they'll just pretend that they're doing right, but deep down, they will find other ways to get around what you're doing. And also it'll bring out a big backlash from them, like the Donald Trump business. So what I mean is that you just kind of consider what I'm saying. Just consider it, that it's not just the white people who need to, or the people doing wrong, I'll say, who don't know how to treat others. Why should they get all the training? What about the people who have to deal with that?
Absolutely, and I thank you for bringing that to us. And like I said, it's something that we have on our radar, and we will look to figure out the best ways to implement those types of supports for our employees.
Madam Chair, one more question. There was something said that there were 3 Black communities in the HRM. Our history, people coming here, I'm old, so I'm allowed to do this. People coming here know there are more than 3 Black communities in the HRM, and I'm not trying to insult who said that. Fine, go look, go read a book, and get the names of the Black communities that have been overrun. They're still there. So if you want to look, don't delete them. Go ahead and put their names in, and they're still a Black community. Just because some people moved in on their land doesn't make them not a Black community.
Thank you. To you, Madam Chair, to the member. The 3 communities that were specified were communities in our municipality that are involved in the Land Titles Initiative. So it's North Preston, Cherrybrook Lake Loon, and East Preston at this time. More communities may be added in the future, but that's what I was just speaking to. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, of course.
So I was wondering if we can get, or I guess more correctly, how can we get more information about the employment circles in Lucasville and Hammonds Plains, and when they're happening, and how can I tell people to go to it?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Member Howe. Certainly, we have just gone through communications for our creatives that were done up for those circles, and they'll be distributed shortly. We can have the clerk's office certainly distribute the upcoming advertisements to you as well.
Can we move on now? Any more comments? No? Okay, perfect. So, as I was saying, I think we agreed to do the vote every month for the proposed meeting schedule for 2024. Is that correct?
I believe the monthly was for 2023.
Okay, so no 2020, that was made a decision for 2024. Okay. Do we have a meeting schedule for 2024? Was it circulated?
Yes, I did circulate the proposed meeting dates with the agenda package.
Okay, perfect. Let me see, I don't think so. Thank you. Thank you. So,
Second Thursday of each month.
okay, it's not bad. So can we have a mover and a seconder to approve the proposed 2024 meetings schedule?
Say that part as well, that it's the second.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so it's the second Thursday of the month when possible, from 6 to 8 p.m. when possible. Location can be held virtually or in person at 60 Alderney Drive, so where we are right now. So can I now get a mover and a seconder?
Mover.
Okay. Seconder? Did I hear
Second.
seconder? Okay, perfect. So, ask the mover to read the motion. That the African Descendant Advisory Committee approved the 2024 African Descendant Advisory Committee meeting schedule as outlined in the staff memorandum. Sorry, memorandum. All those in favor say yay, and all those opposed say nay.
Yay.
Yay.
Okay, so I declare that the motion to approve the 2024 meeting schedule carries. Committee member updates. Invite the Chancellor Smith to provide the presentation about how the municipal government works. Thank you. Oh, it's him.
Microphone check, 1, 2. Hello, everybody. I can do the clicking. Yep. Just give me a sec here. Oh, just trying to bring up my notes. No, I can do that. How do I do it so I can see my notes at the same time? It's not working. It's not working. All right, I'll figure it out. So, hello everybody. So I will try not to make this a grade 9 civics government class as best as I can. So bear with me, and I won't assume that you know what I am talking about. So I'm gonna be pretty base level on municipal government and government in general. And please feel free to ask any questions at the end. And I also, with some of the conversation that happened tonight, I'll elaborate a little bit on process as well. So, all right. So the overview will be the levels of government in Canada. As we know, there's 3. What is Halifax Regional Municipality and how to get involved? So the first slide really just talks about the orders of government. So as many of you know or don't know, that Canada is is under the monarch of the King. So for me, for example, as councillor, when I first got sworn in, I had to swear an oath to the Queen, which personally was very interesting for me, never having to do that. So, that's just part of how our government here in Canada works. And then the three order of governments under the monarch is federal government, the provincial government, and municipal government. So just really quickly highlighting the federal government. So a central government for all 10 provinces and 3 territories. Capital is Ottawa, derives the powers of the Constitution, and elected by a party system, with the head of the party system being the Prime Minister. Also to highlight our current situation. So right now we have a Liberal government with a minority government. So that means that they didn't have enough seats to form government. So that means they had to form what's the word I'm looking for? Not a connection. Someone help me here. Coalition. Thank you. It's been late. It's been a long day. Coalition with another party, the NDP, so they would be able to form a government to make decisions. We'll get into that. Doesn't happen at municipal government, but that's just some of the things you'll see in the federal world. Provincial. We have 10 separate provincial governments in Canada. Each shares and divides responsibility to govern with the federal government, derives from the powers of the Constitution, political party system, just like our federal government, and the head of the party with the most seats becomes premier of the province. And currently we have a conservative government here who has the majority, and the difference of the majority and minority for us in Nova Scotia is the provincial government can make decisions on bills, put them forward, and not have to get input from the other parties because they are in power. So when you have the majority, you can pretty much dictate what will happen in government, where in federal government, because the current Liberal government doesn't have the majority, they have to work with other parties to get their agenda forward. So typically, you see governments that are formed with the majority, but sometimes you see minority. But here in the province of Nova Scotia, we have a majority conservative government, and when they bring things forward, most likely it's going to stay the way that they see it. So municipal government, which you are representing as committee members here, many municipalities, local governments across Canada. And rather than a constitution, municipalities are created and regulated by the province, Provincial Government Act, and they are granted their own powers. So interestingly enough, when you go across Canada, different municipalities have different powers. For example, here, and I'll talk about this further down the line, but here we don't do, well, we kind of do housing. We don't do schools, and we don't do hospitals and healthcare. But in some municipalities across the country, they dabble in that, or they are actually responsible for some of those worlds. So depending on what the province gives municipalities within their acts, depends on what you'll see with them. So this is a map of HRM, and you may not know this, but HRM is very, very large, about the size of PEI. So for example, if you go from one side of HRM to the other, it takes about 3.5 hours to drive. So it's a very large mass that HRM covers. And, when I say we go all the way to Ecum-Secum, people think I'm just, making up a joke. No, Ecum-Secum is part of HRM, which is rural. So with that, it brings lots of challenges to the issues that are happening around HRM. So roughly 40,000 residents, 14th largest in Canada, and the largest municipality in Atlantic Canada. And the last census, 2021, it was identified that 28,000 people who've entered the census identify as Black. And among that 28,000 who answered the census, 20% of them said they were immigrants. There wasn't a breakdown of like those who might recognize as African Nova Scotian or from historic Black communities. That's a little bit harder to get down to those numbers, but very, very interesting either way. So how are we governed? So Halifax Regional Council, which I am a member of, is the decision-making body for the municipality. So similar how I mentioned the provincial government makes bills, Halifax Regional Council is the stewards of the municipality through bylaws, legislation, well, not legislation, bylaws, policies, and whatnot. So there are 16 counselors within each district. There's no political party system, so we all are representatives. We are one vote. So if, say, I want to put something forward and I want to get my other colleagues on board, I don't need to worry about someone being another party who's not going to vote for that. What I love about municipal government is you vote with the information provided and how you see it, rather than having to toe the party line. So that's why I really appreciate our no party system. But I will highlight that there are municipalities in Canada that do have party systems. For example, Montreal. Montreal has a party system within the municipal government, and some also have membership where currently we're elected by district here. There are some municipalities who are actually elected by member at large. And what that means is whoever gets the most votes, they get the seats until the person who has the least amount doesn't get a seat. So there's really different ways that our municipalities work across Canada. And who does what? So this one we could spend a lot of time on. I'm not going to read them all off because I'm going to go into a little bit deeper to what HRM does. But some of the confusion that you'll see around when we talk about the blurred lines of who does what, biggest ones are healthcare, property rights, housing, and education. There's always confusion on who is to do what, and housing being the biggest one, as we know and as we see in the current climate, that it's hard to kind of unblur the lines on who's responsible for what. And we can get deeper into this if you want to when we're done. I'm happy to take some questions, but that information is there, and I think you got this in your board package as well. So just to get a little bit deeper into what we do as HRM. So as mentioned on the slide here, snow removal, public, and I'm only covering some public libraries, sewer and wastewater, water treatment, garbage and recycling, traffic signals, roads, parks and recreation centers. A lot of what I say when I go into schools and I do this presentation is really think about the things that you use every day. We are most likely responsible for as a municipal government, and that is part of why we are said to be the most accessible government, because the things that we are doing affects your everyday life. And just to take some time to talk about the shared piece of it, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about why correctional facilities and schools and police are in here. So you might not know this, but correctional facilities, even though we don't play a role in them, the municipality gives a significant amount of money from tax dollars to the province for correctional facilities and for schools. And if any of you are homeowners or know people who own homes and they complain about their tax bill, on their tax bill, it says the breakdown of what goes to schools, schools, transit, correctional services, and some other I can't think off top. So yeah, the shared piece really gets nuanced when we start dealing with, again, going to housing. So as many of you know, when you go across the city, you see tents in our parks. So when a lot of the tents are within HRM right away, and then that, in a sense, becomes our problem as HRM. But the issue is we don't have social services under our responsibilities. Social services is run through the provincial government, and they have billions of dollars to deliver that service where we do not. So, but because of the urgency and the crisis of housing and homelessness, HRM has in the last few years stepped up to try to deal as best we can. But that doesn't help the blurriness when we do decide to step in, because now we're taking on some of the work of the provincial government. But again, we can go into a little deeper onto our responsibilities, and you can see through the logos there are some of the organizations that you probably see all the time that are direct responsibility of the municipality. So municipal elections, that one really is self-explanatory. Regular elections are held for mayor and members of regional council every 4 years. Last election was held 2020, so next year will be the next election, 2024. So I hope that if there's anybody who is interested in running or interested in supporting candidates or just thinking about elections, this is the time to start doing that work because election is right around the corner. And also special elections are held when someone needs to fill vacancies. So if I decide to quit today, Ian and his team would have to blow a gasket because they'd have to do a special election, which also costs a ton of money. But that is something that happens all the time when is needed. And when I go to schools, I ask students, what do you think you need to be in order to be an elected official? And, they say, well, you need to have a master's degree. You need to have a PhD. You need to have a family member who's a politician. You need to have money. You need to be rich. Are you rich? No, I'm not. So, but really all you need to be is 18 years of age, Canadian citizen, and reside in Nova Scotia for 6 months and not owe any back taxes. That's it. So me, who was Joe Smo before I got elected, library guy, no political experience, became a elected official. So it is one of those worlds where you think it's unreachable, but it actually is not. And the mayor, did I not? Oh my goodness gracious, I'm doing too much things. Sorry. That's that slide. So the mayor is elected at large. So when you run to be mayor, you run for the actual position. It's not like if you get the most votes, you become mayor. Here, it's you run for the role as mayor. And obviously, if we go back to our slide for the size of municipality, it's a lot of ground to cover and a lot of issues that you'd have to be aware of from urban all the way to rural. And again, the mayor is one vote. So many folks say, well, if you're the mayor, then you can make all the decisions of the city. No, the mayor is one vote just like me. So we are at an equal playing field when we sit at that council table. Now, the mayor does try to, depending on what their priorities are, put things forward in the direction that they want to go, but council needs to give them that direction. So the mayor, even though the mayor's the head of the city in the sense of as the elected official, there's still one vote, same playing field as me and my other colleagues. And then for council, again, 16 councilors, one for each district. So for me, for example, I have about 25,000 residents within my district. That's a lot of people. So, times that by 16 with various numbers. And so, but, a lot of residents who need representation. That's why we have such a big council makeup, and all the councilors are also full-time. So there are other municipalities who have part-time councilors because their cities are not that big or they don't have the budgets. For us, it's a full-time role because of the amount of work and also the size of our districts. And again, our role is to work on behalf of the people, but also to be the stewards of the budget and policies and rules of the municipality. So civic administration. So this one is not as exciting, but is very important. I know Ian giving me the eyes there. So the civic administration and the folks who are in this room supporting you today are the ones that make the wheels turn on for the city. Us as elected officials, we are kind of the inside seats. We're the steering wheel. We're the things that kind of are more for show, but the motors, the wheels, the clicky thing to turn left and right, that's these folks here who are making sure that our city is running and being supported. So our CAO, Chief Administrative Officer, is in simple terms the boss of the bosses. So council is we only have two employees. We have two employees, which is the CAO, Chief Administrative Officer, and the Auditor General. And the CAO, who is the boss of all 4,000 staff. And then that CAO has executive directors and directors who then support the other folks. I have a chart that I'll show in a sec. So the CAOs has to answer to council because we are responsible to hire the CAO, but to also make sure that work is being done that as council we want to see done. So for example, just to go to some of the points brought forward by member Jerry around how do we get to dealing with the issues you feel is important. So how we do that at council. So for example, and I'll just make up a scenario, say that I want us to build a new library in Mulgrave Park. So in order to get to that spot, I need to first bring a motion, a notice of motion to council. So not even, I can't just show up to council and bring up a motion out of the blue. I need to give proper notice so that the public knows, so that staff know, and so that my council colleagues know to prepare for what is possibly coming. So when I give that notice, what that then means at the next meeting, we will then discuss it. So how that would work is I give the notice, the following meeting, I put the motion on the floor, and then now we have a discussion on why I want the report on why I want to build a library in Mulgrave Park. But what would happen is my council colleagues may say, you know what, that's a ridiculous idea. We're not going to support that. And if they don't vote for it, it dies. But if they do say, you know what, that's an okay idea, let's at least get a report to understand it, and we'll vote for it then, say it gets passed, then the CAO, because the reports always go to the CAO, will then designate whatever staff, and I'll just use Tracy because she's here as a director. You're director, right? Yep. As a director, those CAO will say, Director Tracy, this is the report, figure out how to get it done. And it would be Tracy's role to run the numbers, figure out, is it possible, work with community members, work with our departments. And then once that report is complete, it will come back to council. And then staff may say, actually, councilor, that was a great idea. We'll do it. This is how we're going to have to do it. Or they may say, that's a terrible idea, and here's why. And they have to give rationale. And there will be a recommendation attached to that. Either, yes, we want to build it, or no, this is a bad idea. But there's also ways we can get around that. So say staff's recommendation is to not build it, there's always an alternative. So we as council are supposed to get alternatives. So we could say, even though you told us no, I want us to still do it. And if council agrees, now Tracy has to figure out how to build that library, because council has given direction, even though against staff orders, we want you to still do it. That can happen. So a lot of that can happen with the administration, and you know, we give the very high orders in a sense, and we hope that staff come back with what we want, but sometimes they don't, because they are the ones that are responsible to make sure that it's in the best for the city. Couldn't think of the word. It's been a long day. Yeah, usually financial. So this is the organizational chart. Not going to cover it, but this really gives you an idea of how council works, how the CAO and who the CAO is responsible for. And as you can see, it gets smaller and smaller. And again, that's 4,000 people who are included within all of this hierarchy. So it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. Again, that's there for your reference. But how do we pay for all that? So some of you might not know that we are this close to being $1 billion municipality, which might sound like a lot of money, but it's not, considering the responsibilities that we have, as I covered. So approximately 81% of HRM's revenue, so the money that we got coming in, comes from residential and commercial property taxes. We don't really have other ways to collect money based on how the province has given us powers. So the provincial government, which you can see down on the bottom there, their projected revenue for 23-24 is $14 billion as a whole. The city, everything we do, all the services I talked about earlier, that we need to make sure that your water is working, that your roads are safe, your street lights are working, recreation centers are all running. We all got to do that within $1 billion, so give or take. And that takes a lot of work, and budget process goes probably about almost 4 months every year to make sure that we're looking at how all that is being done. And to some little quick facts on the side there to kind of give you an idea how much we put into some of the work. And again, one of them, as you see, is 1.1 million for homelessness. Again, that gray line, because it's a crisis, we thought we need to put some money forward there. And I thought it was also interesting fact, just as it's highlighted there, Dalhousie University budget or revenue in expenditures is almost half of our budget as a city. So again, that's just Dalhousie University. So imagine that we are running a city or a municipality the size of PEI on $1 billion. It takes a lot of work and a lot of stewardship. Again, we can get a little deeper in that one if you want to. Also, sorry, a very important piece too. So I talked about earlier that we give money to the province. So out of that budget that I mentioned at 800 or 980, 180 million of it, almost 32%, goes to the province. So without us having any say in that money, we just cut a check to the province and hope that they do the work that is needed. And that is part of our mandatory fees, and that goes to corrections, housing, fire prevention, stormwater, education, and supplementary education. So supplementary education is like your arts programs, your library, librarians and library programs, and I think some food programs, and also some of the secondary support teachers also goes towards some of that money. But again, 180 million right off the bat, 32% goes to the province. We get no say in it. So it's a lot of money. And the last slide is just about boards and committees while you're here today, and maybe you can even just do it from the table. Goodness gracious me. If you just want to cover a little bit about the boards and committees, and I'll take questions.
Sure. Thanks, Councillor Smith. So this is just a high-level overview of how the committee structure works within the Halifax Region Municipality. We have multiple different types of agencies, boards, and committees. Some are required by legislation, some are directed by regional council. This group here together today is one that has been directed by regional council for the purposes of being an advisory board. Advisory boards all have individual terms of references and all have individual tasks that they are assigned and roles that they have with the municipality. This is something that we are currently in a review process for all boards and committees to look at how we can be efficient, but also get this important information back to regional council as they're making their decisions. It's one of the most dynamic things that we try to accomplish. I will put a quick plug in that we are currently in our fall recruitment for agencies, boards, and committees. So if you or anyone you know is interested in serving in any of the boards and committees, please have them come contact the clerk's office or look at the website, and we can definitely have any conversations with anybody who'd be interested in serving. Sure. Absolutely. Tracy just asked me to touch a little bit on how boards can influence the decision of council and the decision-making process of council. So this is something that is important for all of us to look at the process of decision-making and how decision-making is done through council. So as the reports that we've discussed tonight are created and generated, staff are tasked with bringing forward some of these items through these advisory bodies. We are seeing today reports on representation of the Halifax Regional Police. There are other reports that go forward to meeting bodies to get lived experience, influence, and information towards the council reports that they go forward with council in making a decision. What these conversations, and I think Member Jerry made this comment before, these tough conversations sometimes are used to influence policy, to get that lived experience component of policy decision making and try to provide tangible feedback on the policy decisions regional council is facing. Now, one of the things that Councillor Smith alluded to throughout this, regional council and the municipalities in Canada are only empowered to do their work through the provincial governments. There's no constitutional authority of municipalities. So all the information that Councillor Smith provided, all the things that municipalities are tasked with doing are given to them through the tools of the province that they're provided. So this is a thing that I think is important to hold on to when we're having these conversations, that some of the structure, the entire structure and some of the decision making is really based on what municipalities and what their regional councils and agencies, boards and committees are empowered to do. That's where we see when we have the who does what slide, there are conversation points and there are important topics that will be and should be discussed that may not be under the purview of the municipality. And that will be just an important part to draw people back to attention for, is that there are only certain areas of responsibility the municipality can have influence over. And with these boards, committees, and agencies that are provided for the municipality, that does direct some of the content that they can discuss as well.
Thank you very much, Ian. So that's it. So yeah, happy to take any questions to go a little deeper in any of the topics that were covered. And I can also go back on some of the slides if you want me to. So any questions, Chair?
No questions. Oh,
Well, again, I have one.
yeah.
The constitutional authority, the city charter,
Mhm.
Does that give HRM legal authority to do anything?
It's the municipal charter.
I think that, I don't know what it's called. I think there's a charter that you have to be a city.
Oh, yes, the Halifax Charter. Are you, so yes, depending on specifically what you're, so just give me an idea of what you're thinking, because it does give us powers, but on different aspects of.
Well, let's say for housing.
All right, so the charter for Halifax, and this is actually an argument that we're kind of having with the provincial government now around that, because they just amended the charter. But the charter gives us the powers to do housing, focusing on bylaws and regulation in land use policies. So in the simple terms, the charter gives us the responsibilities to deal with land and outside of buildings. So where a building can be, how tall it can be, what it can look like, how far it should be from another property, et cetera, et cetera. The charter does not give us the authority to say what can happen inside, how many units, how cheap should it be, who's allowed to be in those places, how much rent can be. So the charters are very specific on our powers, but also the provincial government can change that to give us different powers. So for example, why we're kind of in a fight with the provincial government right now is because they changed the charter so that Minister of Housing is allowed to make housing decisions by himself, which to us is a scary thing. If you can imagine one person, in this case one man, who was elected and not within HRM, is able to make decisions on land affecting residents within HRM with again, because they are a government, they passed a bill, they made some changes, not many, but that is part of the powers we were giving, but also the powers that can be taken away. So if the province doesn't like something we're doing, they can slap us on the wrist and say we're going to do that.
So I'm wondering, so with that great big organizational chart.
Mhm.
Oh, gee, you're fast now.
I'm quick.
I'm wondering, oh, here we go. Thank you. So what I'm wondering is basically all of the things that are listed under the folks' names
Mhm.
under each topic. Are those things are those things that we can influence or request reports on, or look at how they concern our African Nova Scotian communities? Are these, would this be a majority or some of the list of the things that we would be wanting to focus on and address?
So that's a good question. So I will say two things. One is that this is organizational chart from our last budget. Things could have changed. Some of these people might not be in these positions, but really it was to give you an idea of what type of positions and what type of I guess, leadership within the city. So
Mhm.
I just want to make that clear. To answer your question, so anything as a membership, and we'll discuss this later on in the last item, that you feel is a priority for your committee, our job as supporters, because even though I'm a committee member, I'm still a counselor, and I work with staff as best as I can. If you prioritize an item that's, say, under strategic projects, I just pulled one out of the hat there, that has something to do with development services or engineering and building services, we'd have to figure out how, one, what is the connection to the mandate of this committee,
Mhm.
and how we bring that back to you to make a decision. Now, that's kind of the simple way of looking at it, and Ian will probably kind of get a little bit more deeper on how to get to that spot.
On the less simple things, apparently. So I will draw your attention to item 9.2.2 that's on your agenda today. So if you look at the way that that motion is structured, it will give you a really good idea of kind of the process that is required for that.
Yeah.
So the terms of reference for this committee require the Executive Standing Committee of the HRM to approve the staff report requests. So this is very consistent with other advisory committees. This is so we have a significant amount of report requests in the organization at all times. Some of these report requests, they cross over, and there's similar topics. So we want to make sure when we're coming through that this is a report, and the staff effort required to draft the report is something that Executive Standing Committee, which is comprised of members of Regional Council, says, yes, they agree. This is information that is important for decision-making. This is information that staff should be spending their time on. I have not seen many of these motions move through the advisory committees and then not be endorsed or ratified by standing committees. But if that were to occur, we would bring something back to this group to let them know what happened with it. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that this group, their request for staff reports and the request for information does go through Executive Standing Committee. It's not just done here.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the member. Member Andrew, those lists of sort of business units, yes, those are areas that we're responsible for. So if you're looking, say one of them said solid waste, and you wanted to know solid waste and its impact on African Nova Scotian community, or whatever. So that list there, although dated, and we can get you a more up-to-date organization chart. I'm getting feedback? Okay, but those are subject areas that if you wanted to explore them further, again, following as Ian said, that motion process, that's how you would get the information. But yeah, those are, that, Councillor Smith, can you put that slide back up, please? That slide actually kind of gives you a feel of the different areas that we work under in the municipality. So, yes, that's kind of a simple answer to the question.
Yeah, and just to highlight a little bit more what Ian said around when you bring something forward and it goes up, as he said, it's very I shouldn't say unlikely, but it hasn't happened frequently where a recommendation from a advisory committee, which made its way to one of the standing committees of council, didn't get endorsed, because usually to get there, there's work done with staff, there's work done with the committee, and we also make sure that it meets the mandate. So, most times when it gets to that stage, it's at a point where if council says no, it's for a reason, because council decided to not because it can't happen. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that we will support you as best we can to make sure that if something makes its way up the ladder, whether or not council's going to support it or not, at least know that it is possible and within our purview as a committee and as a municipality.
Madam Chair, through the rest of the committee, I also will reiterate the comment from earlier in the meeting. We are going to set up some additional time with the chair to have some conversations, and then I will commit to coming back here or to come back into a training session to talk about making motions, how we can provide some assistance for this group. So, I mean, to be totally frank, we want you to be comfortable in this space, in this meeting type, but also comfortable with what you're doing outside of meetings, so you know that what you're doing is meaningful and providing the benefit that you were looking for. So I do want to say that I want to commit from the clerk's office. We will provide some additional opportunities to provide clarification and ask more questions as well.
And the motions are one of the most important aspects, because that is going to be, that's going to guide what you're asking for. So if your motion is either too prescriptive or not prescriptive or not enough, that could cause delays. So you want to really make sure that when you're creating motions, when you're bringing things forward, that it's giving the information that's needed, but also it's pretty concise on what you're asking for. That way there's no confusion on what you want to see done, which is, very important. Anyone else with questions? Let's see. Oh,
Yeah, Councillor Smith through Madam Chair. Excuse me, my voice is gone. Quick question, and it's probably not a fair question to you because the mayor's not here and the rest of the council's not here, but you happen to be here. If you can go back to your slide on the budget.
Yeah.
This question's coming from a community advocate sort of thing. That budget that's a lot of money. And as you know, we have a housing crisis. And we have two governments, provincial and municipal, that are supposed to be working together to someday somewhat eliminate this issue. And we haven't really figured out how to do this. But common sense approach to me, and what I'm thinking is, we have a lot of property in HRM that's like buildings that are derelict, that are sitting on city property and owned by government. And I don't know what other common sense approach that we could take other than gutting those places out and getting some of those folks out of those tents and into those buildings. It seems like a like a no-brainer. Like it's not going to cost a whole lot. Some of those properties are already you're already paying for power. You're already paying for whatever to keep it going. And I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it's a fair question to you.
That's a very, very fair question.
Yeah. So I was just curious of how this works, because at the provincial level, we have emergency funds for we had two disasters this past year. We had floods and we had forest fires, and there's money to cover those things. Well, housing is, I would say, a disaster right now. There's a crisis. So where's the money for that?
So very, very good question. And why I highlighted it earlier around the blurred lines of housing. So so I'm going to try to, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's a great question.
Yeah.
So in this slide, you see that we spent $1.1 million to address homelessness. Because social services and housing is not within our charter, it's actually within the Provincial Government Act. Like, they are responsible for housing. So for a long time, it was frowned upon for us to even dabble in it, because the provincial governments would say, why are you doing our job? But because of the crisis, for example, the modular units that are behind Senio Pool and over just around the corner here at Alderney, we built those and said, provincial government, get mad at us later, because it was a crisis. And that's why we spent the $1.1 million to deal with that. So that is where our lines are getting more blurred, because we're realizing that we need to step up. And since then, there's been some support within the government to deal with that. Going to the building piece, surprisingly enough, we actually don't have as many buildings as you would think that are actually owned by the city anymore. So, just again, example, Bloomfield, St. Pat's Alexander School, St. Pat's High, which is not existent, but it's green space. And there's probably another one I'm not thinking. Those are all within private hands. If we could rewind the hands of time, I say we could go a different route, but that's all privately owned in the city. We have two motions currently that are in council. One is for us to recognize any municipal land in properties that can be used for housing, for nonprofit housing support providers. So currently that work is being done. What land do we have that can be used? We don't really have any buildings because all of our buildings are pretty much used, or we don't own no more, sadly. And then the other reports that we have is we actually have a homelessness strategy under our public safety strategy as well. And we have people who are dedicated to that now, and they're trying to figure out those common sense ways of dealing with these issues. And that's one of the reasons why we are getting, they're called pallet shelters. They're not actually pallets, they're just the name of them. They're really nice houses for individuals. That's because we as a city said we need this, and the provincial government stepped up and said, okay, we'll support you, because we were going to do it without them. But, you know, thankfully they thought they saw it was important and brought those forward. So it's, again, but at the same time, you know, looking at our budget, it looks like a lot of money, obviously for us, you know, $980 million is, you know, that's life changing for everyone in this room. But when you're running a municipality the size of PEI, that is not a lot of money. And, you know, we do what we can. And as I mentioned, you know, provincial government, $14 billion, the social services budget alone is $1 billion and a bit. And that's not including housing. That's not including mental health. That's not including healthcare. So they have a lot of money to deal with these issues. And that's why we hope to work with them. And again, it's all why it's so convoluted is because the act that we're giving powers by is very prescriptive. And if we go outside of that, we can get in some serious trouble. And folks like our clerk and our municipal solicitors at council will tell us very quickly when we're coloring out of the lines. And sometimes we as council decide to color out of them because we want to address things. But you know, sometimes that doesn't work in our favor for many reasons. But I think that's a very fair question, because it is, you know, you would think, why can't you just fix this issue? But it's, you know, very, very convoluted in a sense. It's a great question.
So second to that, and I'm glad you cleared that up, because I made a Facebook post not too long ago, and I actually mentioned St. Pat's Alexandra, Halifax, the old Spring Garden Library, and some of the comments, somebody did mention the Bloomfield Center, but I thought that was already tendered out, so I didn't bother mentioning that. But anyway, the second side of that, or the flip side of that, is there's a lot of infrastructure going on right now in the city, and there's more condos and apartments and buildings going up than, you know, you can blink of an eye. Every time I drive somewhere, I grew up in the city. Every time I drive somewhere, there's a new high rise. The problem is a lot of those places that they're building, again, are not going to be affordable for people who are, you know, low income wage, or struggling, or on the street, or in tents. So I don't know if that's a combination of, well, I do know, I'm being silly, provincial government and municipal government of getting together and trying to ensure that those places are affordable for people.
So really fast, because I know we're going over time here with this, really fast. So again, important to highlight how this works. So as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to our role as municipal government, when it comes to land use in development, we can say where things can go in how the outside of it works. We cannot determine the inside. And we've tried, trust me, I've tried to put motions forward. I've tried to figure it out. We just can't do it. So what we do now, because we have been told we're not allowed to dictate what happens inside a building, we collect affordable housing monies from large developments, which then goes into a fund, which then we give to nonprofit service providers who then build housing. So, you know, if you can go online, HRM Affordable Housing Grant, look at some of the nonprofits who receive that money. But the problem is, as you mentioned, like, you know, we have a crisis now, and, you know, rents are unaffordable for many people. But that's, again, under the legislation of the provincial government, and they are very, very serious on making sure that we do not play a role in dictating that. And that's why they put heavy-handed legislation in recently, is because they felt that we were starting to creep into potentially not allowing housing to be built fast. But as you mentioned, you go around the city, you see cranes and construction everywhere. So something's happening. So that's the problem that we're dealing with now. And I sit I was a member, but I just sit as a non-member of FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities. They represent all municipalities across Canada and lobby the federal government for things related to municipal government. And one of the things that we've lobbied for and we got was for the federal government, when they're doing housing money, to give it directly to municipalities so we could build housing on our terms. And when we say our terms, that's with nonprofit service providers and making sure that they're for and built the way that people need them. And because of that money, we've received a few $1 million that we were able to build housing for folks of African descent. We were able to build housing for women escaping violence. We were able to build support organizations who were building affordable housing in Dartmouth for those with like deep affordability issues. But in the past, we couldn't have dictated that if that money didn't come directly to us, and we then in turn work with the nonprofits who delivered the housing. So, we're trying to figure out ways to deal with the crisis, but again, it's kind of outside of our purview. But we're starting to see the provincial government step in more and more to try to help circle that issue of housing. So again, good question.
Thanks for answering those questions. And
No problem.
and sorry, that's my inner politician coming out of me.
Hey, that's okay. It's okay. Elections next year.
Try to keep them contained, buddy.
Is that it? All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, goodness, this one, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you can just tell him that he's good to
Okay.
bring his motions.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay. Okay, Daryl Johnson, member Daryl Johnson, you're free to bring your motion forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'd like to bring a motion forward based on my comments last meeting in September regarding the Halifax Regional Police and